Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be adding integers. The rules are, when you add numbers and the signs are the same, add the add-ons and keep the sign. And I'll show you some examples. When you're adding and the signs are different, subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. And again, we will go over some examples. So let us look at when we're adding and the signs are the same. Let's look at some examples. So take for example 17 plus 4. Notice that I have both positive numbers. So add them. 17 plus 4 is 21, and I keep the sign because they're both positive. Let's look at another example. This time, let's look at some negative numbers. If I have negative 8 and I am adding negative 3, notice that I have both negative numbers. The rule is add them. So 8 plus 3 would be 11. And because I am adding two negatives, right, they're both negatives, I keep the sign. So my final answer would be negative 11. So again, the rule, whenever you are adding, the signs are the same, the rule is to add, and then you keep the sign. Let us look at when we're adding and the signs are different, because this is where most students have challenges. Let's look at another example. Let us say we are adding negative 15 plus 24. Going back to the rules say when the signs are different, and notice I have a negative number and I have a positive number. Because when we do not have a sign in front of a number, that means the number is positive. The rule says to subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Now, absolute value is the distance of a number from 0. So I may do a separate video on absolute value, but the absolute value is just the distance from 0. Another thing about absolute value, it is always positive because distance is always positive. Let's continue with our example. So the rule says I'm to subtract. So again, normally when we're subtracting, we are taking the smaller number from the larger number. So 24 minus 15 is 9. Go back to your original problem and notice that my larger number is positive. So my answer is going to be positive. And I don't need to put a positive sign next to my number because it is implied. When there is no sign, the number is positive. Let's look at another example. Let's look at negative 12 plus negative 7. Notice I have two negative signs. This goes back to the first rule, which would be add and keep the sign. Let's go back to the second rule. The second rule is when my signs are different. So let's look at negative 13 plus 8. The rule says I'm to subtract. And again, when I subtract smaller from larger number. When I subtract, I get 5. Look at your numbers. The larger absolute value would be 13 because the absolute value of 13 would be 13. The absolute value of 8 would be 8. So because 13 is the larger absolute value, my answer is negative 5. One last example. 20 plus negative 7. Again, I am adding. negative numbers. So these are two separate signs. So the rule says subtract. And so my answer is 13. Keep the sign of the larger absolute value. The absolute value of 20 is 20. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 20 is larger, so my answer is positive. I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you.